Welcome to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show, and I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Blake Burch. Blake is the co-founder and CEO of Shipyard, the quickest way for data teams to launch, monitor, and share workflows. Formerly the head of data for PMG, he also led the end-to-end data strategy for brands like OpenTable, Travelocity, and Gap, where he helped them scale marketing efforts through algorithms and automation. Today, we're talking about using AI to automate data workflows. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Now, Blake, I always like to ask my guests, where in the world are you?
I'm currently located out of Austin, Texas,
Fantastic. A hotbed of activity, I hear these days. So, a great
and
place.
it is hot. That is for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Yeah. You're going through that incredible heat wave right now. I think it's 110 pretty much every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Well, being in Australia, we're used to the heat as well.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into it. So, can you first kind of baseline for us what data workflows are, just to give our audience a little bit of a kind of understanding?
Yeah. So, really simple examples of data workflows are just moving data in between different systems that you have. It
Hmm.
could be that you're using support tools like Intercom or CRM systems like
Hmm.
HubSpot, and you're
Okay.
trying to move that data into your data warehouse. It could also be the opposite direction, where you're trying to move something from your data warehouse like
Hmm.
Snowflake or BigQuery and move it back into your SaaS tools. But in general, getting access to data is quite difficult. It
Hmm.
takes a lot of manpower to make sure that you can get everything in place and make sure that it's running consistently every single day. That data is being loaded in effectively and that it's being transformed so it's clean and accessible for end business users that you have on your side.
So, a lot of it then is going to be the map of knowing where all this data is and getting it to the right place at the right time.
That's absolutely correct. And an
Fantastic.
area that I am pretty passionate about on my side is trying to figure out like once you have access to the data, how can
Hmm.
you use it for more in the business? How can you go beyond dashboards to
Hmm.
actively automate internal business processes with the data that you have on hand? So.
It's interesting. And within that process, how do you make sure that people are seeing the right amount of data? Because one of the things I like to quote is a line I heard years ago, which is the best way to teach somebody nothing is to show them everything. So how do you make sure you're getting the right information and the right amounts of information to the right people?
I think a lot of it is scoping the problem beforehand, trying to figure out what exactly is it that you're trying to solve, what exactly are you wanting to look into
Hmm.
in the business, and figuring out what are the minimum amount of data points that you can give access to that will be able to help you achieve whatever that goal is. If you can effectively scope things and create that sort of like minimum viable data product, then
Hmm.
it prevents you from having just data overload where you're trying to give access to all the data and hope that someone will find some useful thing for it.
And that sounds like classic design with the whole kind of MVP approach that you give people exactly what they need to do what they need to do, give them some extra if they need it. But the reality is work out all they need to do for the job and nothing more to start off with. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about trying to figure out what is the business value that you can achieve
Hmm.
first and then using that to back into the data that needs to be grabbed and provided for the business. It's just making sure that you're in constant communication with stakeholders so that you're not providing irrelevant data or excess data.
And not letting people go down rabbit holes.
Yes, absolutely.
So you've worked with some amazing companies, which I mentioned in the intro. What sort of messaging are you getting from this level of company about AI? Are they embracing it? Are they really running with it?
I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out how to effectively use AI. There's a lot of hype in the area right now, but
Hmm.
people aren't really quite sure where to fit it in to their day to day workflow. And so we look at things from a data perspective. We see people exploring it from the aspect of maybe trying to like ask a question of a AI chatbot and providing it with the structure of their database. What columns do I have access to?
Hmm.
What are the names of the tables? And then from that, seeing if it can generate like the right sort of SQL queries so that they can actually read the data in without necessarily having to write any code. I see a lot of people focusing on things from that aspect. I also see people trying to provide entire data sets and say, Can you provide an interesting insight? And that has differing success, where I kind of find from my own experience of working with a lot of AI tools is that um, they're not as good about getting things right all the time. They're good at being directional. And so if they're able to give you a head start and you can kind of have a human in the loop process where you can verify that things are working the way you expected, that they are actually correct and accurate, then that's usually where the most use comes from for AI.
So, have you seen any examples where people have seen AI as a silver bullet and imagined it's got too much capability?
I think the super bullet right now is all about almost providing superhuman powers for internal employees. And to give you an example here of something that we just helped the customer out with, our platform has like low code templates that allow you to
Mhm,
move data between those systems. And so they had reports that lived in their dashboards that were in Tableau, and they wanted to take these reports and deliver them out to all of their clients, like hundreds of clients, but the data didn't look exactly like they wanted it to.
mhm,
The people that were accessing the data didn't necessarily have the technical skills, but they knew exactly what they wanted that end file to look like. And so
mhm,
we worked with them to figure out how you could use things like the ChatGPT code interpreter
mhm,
to upload a file, a sample data, and say, hey, I want you to pivot out the data based on this one column. I want you to rename all these columns to be this specific name and to be in this specific order. And then by going through that entire process, eventually it was able to spit out what the uh, file should look like. And they said, yep, that looks right. And then they're able to take the code that was generated there and plug it in to our platform directly, and then have that process run on a daily basis. And so, giving a non technical person the ability to transform and manipulate their data without having to write a lick of code just by providing requirements, that's a superpower. And that's where we're seeing a lot of people gaining more ability to do more with their data without necessarily having to have those technical skills.
So that's a really interesting point that you've made there. And one of my personal favorites about AI, it's enabling people with knowledge to grab hold and get things done that they couldn't have done in the past. It's now making life easier for them so they can really focus on the end result.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that is still untapped a little bit, and
Mhm,
the reason why for a lot of organizations all comes down to like data privacy and security. How do you
mhm,
effectively train people in the organization to use these tools to manipulate data while also training them, hey, don't ever give real data away to this system. Make sure that it is fake sample data, it's slightly changed along
mhm.
the way. Like doing that level of training is difficult. And so I know even from talking to larger brands that some are trying to build in-house systems like ChatGPT, but just for themselves.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily using these external systems. They're custom building with their own models so that they can have control over seeing what data is input to them or not.
So based on that, do you see, this rash of models that, are lesser beings, so to speak? Everybody thinks, oh no, I've got to make my own model, and they just won't be as good. And so they're not going to get good results out of them.
I do see that potentially being a concern. Why I'm a little bit more in the court of just trying to effectively train people. Hey, never
Mhm,
upload real data, but here's how you can like take the data, make it a sample, make it something to where you're not going to be giving away something proprietary, but you are going to be able to speed up the delivery process of what it takes to transform or do something against that data. I think it's a little bit of a losing battle trying to fight against some of these companies that have billions of dollars to funnel into models, and even the ones that do are not always as fully baked as some of the other models that are out there. Things like Llama, for instance.
mhm.
I know it hasn't quite achieved the same performance that you can see with different OpenAI models.
But not short of marketing behind it.
Yeah, there's still plenty of marketing behind those models, though.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things I'm hearing you say though there is be careful about what information you're sharing with AI, especially if it's one of the external big names. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, and I think that would consistently be true. I know a lot of the larger enterprises are the most concerned about some
Mhm.
of those things, but I do think it's important since some of that data can actually be used for other training that you try to make sure when you're solving a problem that you provide the bare bones for what you're trying to achieve alongside the like full requirements of what you need to perform it on. And then whenever you have like the output Python or whatever it's generating for you, you then apply that on your own to the data that you know you have internally. And that's what we're seeing a lot of clients try to do on our system. Just because they're wanting to make sure that that data isn't actively getting sent to that AI tool.
Yeah, letting people's data out into the wild like that could be a little bit dangerous. I can see that.
Yes, absolutely could.
So, just on that one example that you gave for a moment, how much
Mhm,
time would that have saved? You've got the example where you've got smart people, but not with this particular skill set, but they know what they want
mhm.
to get everything done. Would you say it was a 50% saving in time, 90% time saving in time? What would you say?
Honestly, I would say that it's probably at least 2 weeks of savings. We're talking about a small problem that
Mm,
someone wouldn't be able to solve on their own, that they would have to be sending over to someone on the engineering team, and they'd have to put in a ticket to, like, Jira, and then you'd have to verify, "Oh, well, is the engineering team able to fit it into this current sprint, or does it need to be pushed down the road?" And so,
mhm,
it's not a super labor-intensive activity, but trying to get it prioritized in the organization when you're trying to have multiple parties collaborate just to solve this one problem. It's much easier to solve the problem when the person that knows they have the problem and they
mhm.
know how they want to solve it is able to provide those requirements and get the final output that they want on their side.
So, with that example there, you've actually given multiple benefits. Not only does the end customer get exactly what they need in a much shorter amount of time, but also the rest of the organization isn't getting weighed down with relatively mundane tasks for the higher skilled technical parts of the team.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And on the other hand, for people that are technical, like I have more of a technical background with
Mhm.
Python and SQL, and I've been really fascinated trying out everything related to the ChatGPT code interpreter because
Mhm.
I feel like it could accelerate my own ability to code. I don't have to run anything locally, and so like recently, I built out a proof of concept where I was trying to say, hey. Could we add something to our application that is going to take conversations from ChatGPT and parse that conversation for the code that needs to be run and just have it insert itself automatically into our application. I was able to build out the entire proof of concept in, I don't know, 6 hours, just by like breaking out what I wanted to do into
Mhm.
multiple different chunks, providing the requirements, and then stringing those different chunks of code that were generated together. And so something like that probably on my own would have taken 20 hours or so, and so it's a huge time saving for
So it's a
me as
huge
well.
saving, yeah.
Yeah,
About 70% saving there. I mean, that's really impressive. And when you multiply that over other projects and you and the rest of the team get better at using these tools and the tools sharpen up a little bit even more as they are doing, it just gets better.
correct. Yeah, and that's where for our team, I actually set the initiative at the beginning of the year that everything we do should start with AI because I don't
Mhm.
know exactly what it's going to be used for, but I do know that it is going to enhance our productivity. It is going to make us faster, and we're reaping the rewards of that right now. Like people are finding super unique ways to figure out how to incorporate it into their workflow because when they're starting a new project, they're starting by like asking for ideas from the AI.
Mhm.
They're starting by trying to ask like implementation strategy or code or anything else there. They're trying to see, well, instead of me doing this, can the chatbot do it? And so
Mm.
that sort of mindset shift is just opening doors all over the place for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, the whole idea of this initially being a Kickstarter and giving people ideas that they may not have had before. That's an incredibly powerful part of AI.
Yeah.
Just on the code aspect of AI, you mentioned the code interpreter side of things,
Mhm.
and I've seen some examples of code being written by AI now. What's your take on the quality of that code right now?
I think the quality of the code is dependent on the quality of the requirements that you provide it. In general, I haven't found too many use cases where the end result is actively poor. But I
Mhm.
think the problem is I see a lot of people expecting perfection initially, and I almost see the entire aspect of working with AI to be kind of this iterative process. It mirrors the development life cycle itself because
Mhm.
I provide the requirements. It comes back with something that looks like 70% of what I asked for. And then I have to come up with a new thing to say, no, well, actually, it needed to look like this. And well, that part was wrong. And then it comes back and provides like another script, and it's still a little bit wrong. We're like 90% of the way there. And then we keep on iterating through that until finally there's a working product that does exactly what I expected from the beginning. And I probably could have gotten to that perfect product had I been better at like writing exactly what I wanted beforehand and preventing there from being any sort of ambiguity. But I
Yeah.
do think that the end code you can get if you go through that entire iterative process is pretty good. And it does
Mhm.
exactly what you need to. It's not going to be the best, like well structured code, but at the end of the day, I prefer something that gets the job done versus something that
Mhm.
is super cohesive and is going to last forever and be in the right sort of like engineering structure.
And it sounds like, the amount of time that you're saving again with that approach, even though it's a variation of what you've been doing it anyway, it's just a case of you get it done. That iteration process is just bang, 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 way quicker.
Yes, 100%.
So the other part that you mentioned there, which I think is incredibly important, is getting the prompts, getting the commands right, or the explanation into whatever AI system you're using
Mhm.
to develop the skills there, which is really about kind of language skills and in our case, English language skills, and making sure you're expressing it in the correct way.
Yeah, I've kind of joked internally with some people that what we're looking at in the future is almost conversations as code. Like we
Hmm.
really have to try and figure out how do we structure things correctly in terms of like how we're asking for them to have that be translated directly into the output code that does ultimately what we wanted it to.
Okay, interesting. So, can you give us some more examples of how you've used AI with data workflows with some of the customers that you've got?
Yeah. So one other example that is pretty relevant on our side is that we have quite a few customers that have been using us recently for things like transcription, using services like OpenAI's Whisper.
Mhm.
They might want to be transcribing multiple different videos that they have on their systems and making sure that those transcriptions are continuously uploaded and sent to whatever service that they're uploading videos on, whether it's YouTube or Vimeo or anything else like that. So, on our platform, what we've been able to help them out with is things like uh, being able to figure out what is all the data of like all the YouTube videos that you have on hand. What are all of their IDs? Do they have transcriptions or not yet? The next step would be something where you're trying to figure out which of those don't actively have transcripts. And if they don't actively have transcripts, then you can kick off a workflow that says for this ID, download the video. Once the video has been downloaded, run it through the transcription service through like OpenAI Whisper. And once that's done, then you can go and upload that file to any sort of storage service, or you can go and upload it back to the source on YouTube. But we're seeing for some of those, and we've actually been like dog fooding this and testing it out ourselves as well. Once you have that transcript in place, well, you can use that transcript to then pass it through OpenAI services again to maybe summarize it and create a blog post automatically off of those videos that is then connected to those videos. You're able to use that to like repurpose and like chunk things out and figure out like based on the script where are the sections and the timestamps that you might want to cut down videos. And so a lot of that is still experimental and us trying to figure out how do we take it beyond just automating the
Mhm.
process of doing the transcription, but it's the fact that we can now, which is really kind of mind blowing.
It almost sounds like you're going in an object orientated mode and you're building on the classes. You start off with that first class and then you kind of build on top of that.
Yep. It's exactly like that. And so we're finding just multiple different types of use cases on our side. It's not just heavy-handed data that's in like HR or finance or anything
Mhm.
else like that. It's literally any data from any sort of system that you might be using, and then incorporating AI into part of that workflow.
And with the work that you're doing with your customers, how
Mhm.
are they changing their internal structure? Are they, yeah, changing the work that people do? Are they adding more people, laying people off? I mean, what's actually happening? How is it altering, almost the DNA of the organizations?
So far, from the companies that we work with, it's not really altering the organizations in terms of them like laying off a bunch of
Mhm.
individuals or anything else like that. It's just changing a little bit more of the job scope. I would say that because we work with a lot more like medium-sized brands right now at Shipyard, that we find that a lot of them are able to take on more roles or do
Mhm.
more responsibilities because they have been so greatly accelerated in their productivity from using AI and using services like Shipyard to build out those types of workflows.
So very much a force multiplier for your end customers.
Yes, absolutely. That's the end goal, to make it as quick as possible to move, manipulate, and act on that data.
And how do you see AI changing the relationship between your customers and their end customers?
That's a great question. I think there is a potential risk of it making things less personal initially. I'm sure we've all heard the like articles where staff was laid off to entirely outsource support to AI chatbots. That's not a great long-term strategy, and it's not something that is very like humanizing. But I think there is a really big opportunity to make sure that we're aware of that type of issue that could happen, where we make things less personal because of
Mhm.
AI, but instead figuring out how to make it more personal. What data do we have on hand about individuals that we could maybe incorporate into messages that are being sent via email or messages that people are seeing on the website? And I think if we can really think about the human aspect and make sure that we are having empathy whenever we implement
Mhm.
different AI systems, that we can make sure that the relationship between company and customer is potentially even stronger and more humanized.
So it sounds like there you maybe identified a potential pitfall of losing that human element, that
Mhm.
connection between the companies and the customers if they push this too hard. Would you say that that's the biggest potential pitfall with AI, or do you see any other major ones that are happening right now?
The other pitfall that I see is really the rise of mediocrity, where
Mhm.
if people are over reliant on the product that generative AI tools are able to make, then everyone's quality is just going to kind of be exactly the same. It becomes a game of quantity over quality, to where your goal is to get things out as quickly and rapidly as possible, and they will kind of lose the tone and the real like brand identity that you might be able to have around some of the content. Again, this is more focused on the aspect of using generative AI
Absolutely.
for text versus something like data. And so I could see a real rise in like homegrown content of
Mhm.
like having influencers or people in the space that have strong followings, like building things on their own that are not with AI, and that being a larger differentiator. And they supplement what they're building with like rapid fire content that's made with AI.
It
That's
just
the
isn't
other
as good.
biggest issue. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds a bit like, there's the old Pixar movie, The Incredibles, and you've got the baddie syndrome. And,
Hmm.
he invents all these amazing tools and weapons. And he says, once everybody's super, nobody will be super. And it
Yep.
sounds like that level of mediocrity could happen if people let it.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely the case.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there. I think the whole point of, this harks back to the days of people just putting .com at the end of their business name and thinking it's suddenly going to make all the dollars fly in. It doesn't work like that. You've still got to put in the effort.
Yeah. Even with AI, I would say that it's not a set it and forget it system. You'd still have to figure out, how do we continuously improve this? How do we make
Mhm.
it better? How do we make the prompts better so that we can get
Yes.
better outputs overall?
So the prompt engineering side of it is going to be increasingly important going forward.
Yeah, I think the prompt engineering will be important in another aspect that I haven't really seen touched on very much in the
Mhm.
media right now, that I kind of think of as AI ops, is figuring out like how can you break apart the problem into like smaller chunks with better examples or better like
Mhm.
preceded live data that will help result in the output being better. It's not as much like prompt engineering as much as it is like, how do I structure this problem in the right order and with the right models across the board to get the best output.
Makes complete sense. So outside of your company and the customers that you've got, who are you seeing that is doing AI well? Who do you think is heading in the right direction?
I think right now, especially in the data space, I've seen really good things from Hex. They
Mhm.
are a cloud notebooking tool, and they make it really easy to be able to code alongside AI and ask for suggestions and things you might want changed. I know there's tools like Replit in the developer space that are
Mhm.
doing very similar things, allowing you to kind of code very quickly and inline. I would say that those are the types of things that like I typically keep more of an eye on
Mhm.
because they actually start to get implemented into your workflow, and they're things that make it easier to do the day to day work. I think a lot of companies right now are potentially trapped in making things that are more flashy and they look cool on the surface, but they're not actually something that you're going to use on a day to day basis. And I'm trying to be very mindful of avoiding those types of tools.
No, I completely understand. So, in everything that you've seen so far, what's that one piece of advice that you'd like to give to anybody listening today that you wish you maybe you'd had at the start or they should really take on board for moving forward?
I think it's the thing that I mentioned earlier about making sure that you break down the problems into the smallest chunks possible and you string them all together rather than expecting it just to get the right answer from a large problem. When we
Mhm.
started trying to build out AI features for Shipyard, we ended up in a situation where we were fine tuning a lot of the models and putting too much information into them. And ultimately, like down the road, that started to make things very brittle because we didn't break it apart into chunks and provide live information. So I would really advise people starting to think about how do you break the problem down into those chunks so that you can work with AI more effectively.
That makes complete sense. So, where can people find you? And do you have any exciting projects coming up in the near future?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. You should just be able to search for Blake Burch, and you can find our company, shipyardapp.com. And I would say one of the more exciting things we have going on right now is our weekly newsletter for the data space called All Hands on Data. We always provide a lot of exciting articles there. We have a bunch of things that we write ourselves, how we're trying to use AI, things that we're figuring out how to do in the data space. So it's a great read.
Fantastic. Well, Blake, thank you for your time today. That's been really interesting.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Richard.
Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage show. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI advantage today.